lasted for years, and I often recall without reason white sands on a cloudless sky. And whenever I see the horizon, I recapture those days in my eye when we promised we'd run with the reckless, the young, and the restless. We'd run for the rest of our life. We promised we'd run with the reckless, the young, and the restless. Run for the rest of our lives, the rest of our lives. In a world devoid of emotion, when a dream is a dwindling spark, when the sunset fell into the ocean, I would hold her for hours in the dark. Now time is a dangerous enemy, and it's always the same song I sing, from a head full of meaningless memories and a heart that's held by a string. And we promised we'd run with the reckless, the young, and the restless. We'd run for the rest of our lives. We promised we'd run with the reckless, the young, and the restless. Run for the rest of our lives. We promised we'd run with the reckless, the young, and the restless. Run for the rest of our lives. We promised we'd run for the reckless, the young, and the restless. We'd run for the rest of our lives, rest of our lives. Take my hand and we'll toil this land, and we'll soon return to those shores. Take my hand and we'll toil this land, and we'll soon return to those shores. Take my hand and we'll toil this land, and we'll soon return to those shores. Oh, take my hand and we'll toil this land, and we'll soon return to those shores. We promised we'd run with the reckless, the young, and the restless. Run for the rest of our lives. We promised we'd run with the reckless, the young, and the restless. Run for the rest of our lives. We promised we'd run with the reckless, the young, and the restless. Run for the rest of our lives. We promised we'd run with the reckless, the young, and the restless. Run for the rest of our lives, rest of our lives.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that wonderful tune, song, and also the animation. And that's by a Scottish band called Tidelines. And I wanted to play that tune and that song just to remind ourselves that Scottish music and song and culture isn't old. Well, it is old, but it can also be very new and very modern too. So we'll come back to that idea a bit later on in assembly. But what we're going to be doing today is thinking about a very important Scottish person who lived a long time ago called Robert Burns, and you can see a drawing of him here on the screen. Robert Burns was born on the 25th of January, 1759, and on the 25th of January each year we celebrate Robert Burns. He was a poet, he was a traveller, and he was a very interesting person, and he became very, very famous, so famous that we still remember him today. So he died quite young in 1796, and we're going to find out a little bit about his life and why he is so famous and so important that we remember him almost 300 years after he was born. So this is where he lived. Robert Burns' cottage in Alloway in Ayrshire in the southwest of Scotland is still there, and you can go and visit it. You can go inside and have a look at where he lived. And he developed a real sense of what it was like to be an ordinary, hard-working person in an ordinary, hard-working family living in this tiny little cottage in Ayrshire. As a child, Robert listened wide-eyed to all the strange stories told by Betty Davidson. Betty Davidson was his mother's maid, a kind of helper in the house. And she was brilliant at telling old Scottish stories. And he grew up listening to these by the fireside. And this is why he developed such an amazing imagination and an amazing ability to tell stories and write poems and songs about love, about ghosts, about all sorts of things in nature too. And we're going to come back to this poem that you can see a picture on the screen representing, called Tam O'Shanter. When he grew up, Robert and his brother Gilbert rented a farm called Mossgiel, and they worked outdoors. And Robert learned about nature and animals and noticed even the tiniest things. When he was farming one day, he was out with his horse and plough, just like the one in the picture. He was getting the soil ready for planting seeds into. And the plough ran over a tiny little mouse's nest. Can you see the mouse in the picture? And Robert noticed this, and he was very upset that the plough had run over the mouse's nest. And he wrote one of his most famous poems called To a Mouse. And here's the poem. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's quite long, but I'm going to read just a little part so you can hear the language that Robert uses. He didn't write in English, he wrote in Scots. So here we go. To a Mouse. Wee sleekit, cowering, timorous beastie, oh, what a panic's in thy breastie. Thou needna start away sae hasty with bicker and brattle. I would be laith to run and chase thee with murder and prattle. And in that first verse, he's basically describing the mouse as a wee, sleekit, cowering, timorous beastie. So in other words, it's a small animal, a beastie, that is cowering and timorous, quite scared. And he says, oh, what a panic's in thy breastie. Breastie is the Scots word for breast. So he's just saying your heart's thumping because the ploughs come along and scared you. And then he goes on to say that he didn't want to kill the mouse. He didn't mean any harm. Maybe when you get more time later on, you can have a look at the rest of the poem. It's a really wonderful poem with lots of wonderful Scots words. Burns was a great Scot, and he loved his country and was very proud of Scotland. And he even went on a great tour of Scotland, travelling all over the country. He collected stories and songs, and he met people from all over Scotland. And he wrote about Scotland being joined to the rest of Britain. What do you think he thought about that? There's a poem that he wrote about Scotland being part of Britain, and sometimes today this poem makes people angry, and sometimes the poem makes people think about whether Scotland should be part of Britain. So it can be a poem that causes quite a lot of discussion and debate. One of Robert Burns's funniest poems was called To a Louse. A louse is a head lice, a wee beastie that can live in your hair. And he was sitting in church one day behind a very posh lady who had a big hat on, and he noticed that even though she was very posh, she had a head lice crawling around in her hair. And here's the poem. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's quite long, but it's quite a funny poem. Ha! Where ye gone, ye crowling fairly? Your impudence protects you sairly. I canna say, but ye strut rarely our gauze and lace. Though faith, I fear ye dine but sparely on sic a place. So what he's saying here is, even though this lady is very posh and wearing a gauze and lace hat, she still has a head lice crawling around in her hair. But perhaps Robert Burns's most famous poem is called Tam O'Shanter. And it tells the story of a man, Tam O'Shanter, who had too much to drink at the pub one night and what happened to him on his way home on his old horse called Maggie. And really, this poem was written by Robert Burns as a funny poem, even though it has ghosts and witches and wizards and all sorts of scary stuff in it. It was written as a funny poem to teach people not to drink too much alcohol and to be careful when they're out with their friends. So you can see some pictures here from the poem, and I'm going to read some of the bits of the poem that go with the picture. This truth fand honest Tam O'Shanter, as he frae air a night did canter. O Tam, hadst thou been sae wise as ta'en thy ain wife Kate's advice, She told thee weel there was a skellum, a blethering, blustering, drunken blellum. The storm without might, rare and rustle, Tam didna mind the storm a whistle. Kirkalloway was drawing nigh, where ghosts and hoolits nightly cry. When glimmering through the groaning trees, Kirkalloway seemed in a bleeze, though ilk abore the beams were glancing, and loud resounded merry and dancing. There sat auld Nick in shape o' a beast, a towsy tyke, black, grim, and large. To gie them music was his charge. He screwed the pipes and gart them skirl, till roof and rafter added dirl. Tam tint his reason a'thegither, and roars out, "Weel done, Cutty Sark!" And in an instant all was dark. Now do thy speedy utmost, Meg, and win the key stane o' the brig. There at them thou thy tail may toss, a running stream they darena cross. The carlin clot her by the rump, and left poor Maggie scarce a stump. Now wha this tale o' truth shall read, ilk man and mother's son take heed. Whene'er to drink you are inclined, or Cutty Sarks run in your mind, think ye may buy the joys o'er dear, and remember Tam o' Shanter's Mere. So there's a wonderful animation cartoon that was put together by an artist called Raymond Rigby that also tells the story of Tam O'Shanter going to the pub, having too much to drink, and then passing a church. His imagination ran away with him, and he thought he could see ghosts and wizards and witches who started to chase him, but he managed to escape across a river because ghosts and witches and things like that can't cross running water. So I'm going to play you the movie. It's not too scary, but it's just a wonderful, funny retelling of the story of Tam O'Shanter. So here we go. Well, I love that little film, and I'm glad Tam got home, but what a shame for the horse because Maggie the horse lost her tail. Anyway, Robert was known to be an intelligent, funny, and thoughtful man, but he was also known to have had many, many girlfriends, and he had 12 children altogether, we think. He had several jobs. He was a farmer, and then he was a customs officer, and of course, he became a very famous poet. His first book of poems sold 600 copies and soon became very well known. He died at a very young age, only 37. And every 25th of January, people in Scotland and all over the world celebrate the life of Robert Burns. They might eat haggis, they might say some of his poems, sing some of the songs that he knew, and make special speeches about his life. Even today, 250 years after Robert Burns was born, people still recite his poems, sing his songs, and paint his image. This is a very modern painting of Robert Burns by the artist Callum Colvin. You can see lots of things from Robert Burns's poems in this painting. There's a red, red rose, there's a broken heart, and you might be able to find other clues and images from some of his poems or from his life. And as I said at the beginning, Scottish culture doesn't have to be old like Robert Burns. We have very modern Scottish culture too. And I'm going to play you a wonderful song called Tidelines. And I love this song and the video because, the song is called Far Side of the World, and it's by a band called Tidelines. And the reason I love this song and I love this video is that it shows you some very beautiful scenes from our country, from the Highlands of Scotland, but it also tells a story. So if you listen to the words of the song and you watch the video, you might be able to work out what this story is all about.
There are stories I've heard told of an unfamiliar road where an evening sun hangs gold in the skyline. In a quiet unknown town, there is solace to be found in the unforsaken hours of the twilight. There's a girl and I can see her far away from this frontier. 'Cause I wanna dance with a Highland girl where the skies reach out for miles. I wanna feel the breeze of the Hebrides on the far side of the world. On an evening in July, beneath the red loch-covered sky, she smiled and closed her eyes on my shoulder. Now I'm a million miles from home, from the girl I call my own, and I'm dreaming all alone just to hold her. As I look into the water, I see her standing at the altar. And I wanna dance with a Highland girl where the skies reach out for miles. I wanna feel the breeze of the Hebrides on the far side of the world. 'Cause I wanna dance with a Highland girl where the skies reach out for miles. I wanna feel the breeze of the Hebrides on the far side of the world. Nail your colors to the mast in the footsteps of the past, and when you 'cause I wanna dance with the Highland girl, where the skies reach out for miles. I wanna feel the breeze of the Hebrides on the far side of the world, 'cause I wanna dance with the Highland girl, where the skies reach out for miles. I wanna feel the breeze of the Hebrides on the far side of the world, 'cause I wanna dance with the Highland girl, where the skies reach out for miles. I wanna feel the breeze of the Hebrides on the far side of the world, 'cause I wanna dance with the Highland girl, where the skies reach out for miles. I wanna feel the breeze of the Hebrides on the far side of the world.
Well, I wonder if you worked out what the story of that song was all about. I think Robert Burns would have approved because it's kind of a love song, I suppose. And he wrote lots of poems about falling in love. On the screen are some video links that I'm also sending to your teachers because you might want to watch some more Scottish culture, some music, art, when you get some time, either today or later on in Scots Fortnight. And we've got some wonderful music and some wonderful video and animations as well. I wanted to say a huge thank you because you've been busy making some wonderful Scottish art during the fortnight that we celebrate every year, looking at Scottish cultures, languages, and arts. So your teachers are busy sending me the winners from each class, and I've seen some of the artwork already, so keep sending those to me. And next week, on the 28th of January, I'm going to be showing you the wonderful artwork. It's really quite beautiful from all of the different classes, and maybe some of the writing in Scots language that you're working on in primary 5, 6, and 7. And I'm also really looking forward to finding out who has managed to learn and speak, recite a poem, either in Scots language or in English, or maybe even in Gaelic, who knows. So I'm really looking forward to hearing those and to hearing who are the class winners. And then we'll have the very difficult task of choosing an overall school winner as well. And we have some wonderful book prizes, all Scots language books for the class winners. So I hope to be back at school next week to see you all, and I'm really looking forward to that. We're going to finish with just a very short video retelling the story of Robert Burns, and it's a wonderful animation as well, produced here in Scotland, and I hope you enjoy it, and we'll see you all next week.
More than 250 years ago, Robert Burns, or Rabbie, was born in Alloway in the west of Scotland. Although his father was a poor farmer, Rabbie had a good education. He worked on his father's farm, and when he was 15, began to write songs to impress girls.
Oh, my love is like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June.
When Rabbie was 25, his father died. Rabbie took over the farm with his brother. He kept on writing songs for girls and poems inspired by his farming life.
Wee sleekit, cowrin, timorous beastie. Oh, what a panic's in thy breastie.
Rabbie wasn't a successful farmer. He was about to move abroad when his first book of poems was published. It was a massive hit with well-off readers in Edinburgh. After spending time in the city, Rabbie returned to the West and married. The money he earned from his book ran out, and friends helped him to get a job as a customs officer. This allowed him to continue writing. Many of his new poems were influenced by the ideas of the French Revolution, and he wrote about how the rich and poor should be equal.
The rank is but the guinea's stamp. The man's the gowd for all that.
Rabbie died at the early age of 37. Large crowds attended his funeral in Dumfries. His poetry became famous all over the world. On his birthday every year, people gather to celebrate and hear some of his best-known words, such as Address to a Haggis.
Fear for your honest, sonsy face, great chieftain o' the puddin' race.
And when midnight strikes on the 31st of December, people all over the world sing his famous Auld Lang Syne.
Should all the acquaintance
mountains be forgot, and never brought to